to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
I need to get up.
Speaking of like testimony type things, I missed an opportunity a week and a half ago. And
is your internet working?
No, I couldn't load anything on Safari.
Okay.
I'm still getting text messages, like iMessages, but Safari wasn't working.
Gotcha. So sorry, Ryan.
No, you're fine. I missed an opportunity a week and a half ago. So I was driving back from dropping off that painting in Paris, and what is it? Is it Cross Plains that's right there on the interstate when you turn back off? So I stopped at that gas station.
Oh, no. Cisco,
thank you. Yeah. So I stopped at the gas station there, and they didn't have anything.
Which one?
There's like that brand. It's not brand new, but newish gas station on the left.
The stripes on the right, or the like the yellow shell one on the.
It's on the Abilene side, on the south side of the interstate.
Yeah.
And Jack's, maybe a Jack's. I forget what it is. But anyway, I went in there and they didn't have anything fresh or anything. So I was like, crap. And I was hungry. And so I made it
one with all the pies?
Yeah.
And
so I made it to Cisco. No, to Cross Plains. Thank you.
And there's nothing fresh there.
And there's a Subway. And I'm like, I don't know if I want Subway. And so I went through that light. And then I was like, no,
there's nothing else.
I do want Subway. I'm hungry. I'm not going to make it home. So I turned back around and I went back, which is unlike me because
you don't do that.
I don't turn around. If I've already passed it, and
we're also don't stop to pee.
We're talking 3 blocks, but I'm like, I'm already past it. I might as well just go. So I turn around and I go back, and father and his son are in front of me in line, and then there are 2 high school girls working the Subway there, and so I watch them, and they're taking orders on the phone, and they're getting these guys in front of me their food, and then they get my food, and the father and the sons disappear, and one of the girls, I just noticed her arm just riddled with scars, like self-inflicted scars. And so I said, look, I'm not trying to be offensive to you. And I said, I saw a lot of those scars on your arm. And she goes, yeah, they're all over my body. And I said, listen, I said, you can't really see mine anymore, but mine were all across my shoulder and my chest. I said, I used to do that a lot. And just kind of was talking to her and was just saying, I don't know who it was that broke you. I was like, for me, it was mom and dad, but I was like, I don't know who broke you or who did what, but I need you to know that like your life matters and you matter. And so I'm telling her, I was like, I came to the place where I begged God for 4 years to kill me every night. Like I'd go to bed, God, just kill me. And I'd wake up every morning mad that he hadn't. And I said, and now here I am about to be 50. And I said, I'm a pastor and I'm serving the Lord. And I said, there's more grace. Like, so just know that. Right. And so the other girl was like,
wow, that's super cool.
And the other girl was like, oh man, thank you so much. And they're like tearing up. And the other girl's like asking she's like, what does she say? She goes, are you like an inspirational speaker or something? and I said, no. I said, look, I just know that sometimes no one tells you matter. And so I want you to know. And so I gave him my Instagram. I wrote that down for him. And I wish that I had directed it more intentionally towards Christ. I feel like I just blew it, like.
Really?
Yeah. I wish that I had said,
instead of saying I'm a pastor, saying like, listen, Jesus like really changed my life. I got you.
Yeah. And you matter to Jesus, and like Jesus, I wish I had directed it more to Jesus.
Because if you're talking about your pain back in the day, it's a quick and easy way to just say, look, listen, what changed me was Jesus.
Yep. And I here I am, and I blew it. But I'm just praying that like,
no, you didn't blow it.
Yeah.
Because they're now connected with you.
Yeah.
It could have been done better in the moment.
Yeah.
But they're gonna check out your Instagram.
Yeah. And I just hope that there will be an opportunity at some point to be like, and I was wearing my paint pants. I delivered a painting that day. I was like, I'm an artist and a preacher. And they're like, whoa, that's cool. And so I was like, but I was just like, man, 10 minutes later, I was like, crap, I should have, but it was one of those moments that like, I just told Michelle, I called her and I was like, it's kind of cool because, Cisco didn't have any fresh food, so I didn't eat there. I was cutting through Cross Plains and I was like, man, I'm so hungry, but I don't really care for Subway. And then I turned back around and like, it all was, just worked, you know? And just one of those moments that I felt like God really orchestrated. And then I was like, man, sorry, God, I totally jacked that up.
Or
but
maybe he orchestrated because he's trying to like teach you some wisdom in those situations.
Yeah, maybe so. Just try to be more pointed in that.
Yeah. I mean, that story I tell about not giving the dude water, like I realized later, like, I think I had less to do with the dude needing water and more to do with God shaping me.
Yeah. Yeah, to not miss those opportunities in the future.
Yeah,
or that's a good point.
Or to be more specific, to listen when God says to do something, like period.
Yeah. Absolutely. Turn around and go eat.
This was not. This was not one of those situations where I was like, I can't tell if God's telling me to do this or not.
Yeah. Well, I know it wasn't a big deal either, but like I got my Subway sandwich and I tipped him $20, and I was like, look, I know $10 a piece isn't a lot, but just yeah.
Oh, these were the workers.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that does make a difference.
Yeah. And I was like, so it was the 2 high school girls.
That does make a difference.
And so just like, hey, you matter, you know? I can't.
It did make a difference.
Every time I see the scars on people's arms, and I just like, I know what that's like. I was more secretive about mine. My scars weren't where people could see them. So because I'm right-handed, almost all of mine were across my left chest and my left shoulder. And there's only a few that were deep enough that you can still see. Like if I get sunburned, you can still see a few of the scars across my collarbone or something like that. But I must have put 200 or 300 cuts across my chest and shoulder in college. And so like, I understand the mental space there, and it just grieves me. And the difference between me and them is usually if it's on the arms, they're toying with the idea of killing themselves.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you have all these veins here. So like they're getting closer, like they're toying with killing themselves.
Yeah.
And for me, I was punishing myself. Mine was self-punishment because I hated myself.
Self-flagellation. Have you heard that before?
Flagellation.
Someone says it a flagellation. They'll say flagellation.
Dude, I tell you.
That's what happens when you go into a closet and fart.
I was so worried. Like, just all the silly jokes we send each other back and forth of pastors who say things in sermons they don't mean to say that are inappropriate. I was so worried because I was trying to be so serious on Resurrection Sunday, and I kept going resurrection.
Sure, dude.
Say the whole thing, man. Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up.
There were so many clips of that. There was a girl that like
Not me.
No. But the memes going around, like all the clips of different sermons. There was a woman. I don't know what she was doing. I don't know if she was teaching that day, if she was doing the announcements or what. But she goes to say resurrection. And she stumbles over, she goes, and then she goes back to correct herself and then says, the erection of Jesus. So can you imagine doing that where it's like you were on the right path and then you go to correct yourself and you fully blow it. And she shuts down. She goes, what did I just say? And the whole audience just die and laugh.
I was so worried about it. And it doesn't really help me to look back and see both of you in the back. Because I know if I screw up, I can't look back there because you guys are going to be like rolling and I'm just going to hear, So I'm like, oh, come on, man. Come on.
You'll see Pierce with his phone on the stand. I'll get my phone out.
Right, Michelle and I, we play Nerds. I don't know if y'all know what Nerds is, the card game.
What?
I know.
You play playing cards with your wife?
Yes.
Are Christians supposed to do that, Ryan?
Well, actually, Pierce, yes, that was aggressive.
What the hell did you say to me, boy?
we play strip poker.
There you go. there was a clip I was going to send you the other day. It was this older couple.
I don't like that segue.
No, yeah, it was this older couple.
This older couple playing strip poker.
No. But you can tell it was a couple that enjoy one another because, like, the old man did
not getting
I'll finish the story. the old man, he didn't know that the phone was on, and he like goes to flirt with his wife, and he's like, just pull your shirt down a little bit. so she's like, would you stop for 2 seconds? She's like slapping him up. But it was nice to see a couple like bickering at each other. They just enjoy one another. So they were recorded goofing off in there. It's like seeing those old school pictures of couple like 1800s photographs. Have you seen like the mess ups where they're enjoying one another?
Those are fun.
And so it's this really old couple that was just enjoying one another, not playing strip poker to clear the air. But so sorry, continue.
Yeah, no. So that brings up an interesting point. Maybe we should talk about that, Pierce.
Yeah.
So like, there are a lot of things that Christians engage in, and when I was growing up, I grew up in a very conservative church in Midland, Texas. Well, I say grew up. I was there till I was 8 or 9. But women had to wear skirts. Men had to wear. Men couldn't wear. Men couldn't wear blue jeans. We had to wear like slacks or whatever. And
red jeans.
What about brown jeans?
And we couldn't play with you. You shouldn't play with playing cards. They were of the devil, right? Kind of Charles Spurgeon's old thing that there is no greater sin than gambling, because they gambled for the clothes of Jesus with the blood bespattered dice that hit the foot of the cross. So there's no greater sin than that. Never mind gluttony and like, wasn't he a big dude?
Yeah.
But
not as big as Moody.
Really?
Yeah, that was the quote. When Moody shows up at his house, Spurgeon opens the door and smoking a cigar, and Moody's like, I can't believe a man of God would be smoking a cigar. And Spurgeon looks at him and goes, I can't believe a man of God would be so fat.
That's awesome.
Moody must have been bigger than Spurgeon.
That's
I don't think Spurgeon was in shape, but that means Moody was something else.
Yeah, he was big. But
unless he's one of those guys that just like says it no matter.
Yeah. That would be funny if that's how Spurgeon was. We would have gotten along with him. He's just like, but we weren't allowed to go see movies. Like, movies were questionable in our. I mean, we did. We just didn't obey the pastor, I guess. We still went and saw movies, but like,
wasn't Poltergeist your favorite movie as a kid?
Dude, that's just not cool. All right, that's not nice. In the scene where the toys are floating around the room,
I've never seen it.
I'm like, I have that toy. Like, it was like freaking me out.
How'd you feel about the tree outside the window?
Dude, stop it.
I'm sorry.
I still feel very strongly about the tree outside the window.
See why you shouldn't see movies, Ryan?
Right? Thanks, Mom and Dad. Yeah. For those of you who didn't listen to the other podcast, we talked about this on, like, my parents, when Poltergeist came out, I was like 6 years old, and they took me to the theater to see it because they thought, well, you like monsters and dinosaurs and dragons. This is kind of a creepy movie. Like that, yeah. Like, scenes of that movie are playing across my head right now, and this is why Christians shouldn't go to movies. And that's what our topic is today. Yeah. No, but really what our topic is today is we find enjoyment. We find like, we'll use all sorts of things as hobbies, or all sorts of things as distractions, all sorts of things that we will do to, like, there are different shows or movies we like or books we like, and the question really needs to be, like, I don't agree with the position that our pastor took when I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, but like, how do we as Christians exercise wisdom in those things that we should be taking part of, or we're allowed to take part of, we have freedom in Christ to partake of, and then maybe some things that just wisdom would say, hey, this doesn't glorify God, or wisdom might be, no, this is probably not something to engage in. And then there's another category of, hey, this doesn't even glorify God at all. It's not even a wisdom issue. This is a blatant thing. So there's this spectrum, and I think what people try to do is they try to make generalized rules that encompass the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, like, don't go see rated R movies. Like, if you're a Christian, you can't see a rated R movie. And then everybody, we've talked about this on here before, but everybody then immediately broke that rule when The Passion of the Christ came out, because it was a rated R movie, but it was about Jesus. So everybody was like, oh, okay. And then, like, there are other things that people would say on the flip side, you know, that I don't particularly care for The Chosen. And people are like, oh, but it's so good and it's about Christ. I'm like, yeah, but there are some weak things in it, and there are some things in it that I think misrepresent Jesus.
I was gonna say that's a great point, because you basically are saying I'm okay with something that is a misrepresentation of Jesus, but I'm not okay with something that's a little too violent or suggestive. Like, what you've just done is said, I care more about the morality than I do about the gospel.
Right.
And I don't think that they're different. I think that wisdom would say you avoid. I think they're both bad.
Yeah, agreed. And but what we tend to do is we go, well, this one's about Jesus, so it's good, right? We make it something that it's a big truck or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's my stomach.
Yeah.
But we make it. The line is it about Jesus or is it not about Jesus? Well, if it's about Jesus, it must be good. So the same debate, I think, happens with different kinds of Christian music. This is a really good song. Well, no, the theology in the song is terrible or whatever. But like, how do we begin to exercise wisdom? I'll give a couple of examples. So again, the church that I grew up in, they would host movie nights at the church for, I don't know, like it was family movie night. They'd have popcorn and you'd have
Adventures in Odyssey.
No, this was pre-Adventures in Odyssey. But we watched.
I actually really liked those movies.
Yeah, I need to go
never
watch
saw
them.
We watched one of the Herbie movies.
Nice.
And then we watched what was it? Hot Lead and Cold Feet, still one of my favorite Don Knotts movies. It's an old comedy
I
western.
don't know the movie. I don't know who Don Knotts is either. Oh wait, I do know who Don
from
Knotts
Andy
is.
Griffin.
Yeah. Okay.
Andy Griffith Show, Barney Fife on there. But like, anyway, so like we would watch movies and stuff, but it was really, really rigid. And their idea was if you play with playing cards, it's going to lead you into gambling and lead you into all kinds of sin, and it's so funny because I think that maybe there are some people who, like, you probably shouldn't walk into a casino. It's probably not going to be good for you. The same way that I would say there are probably some people it's wise for you to never go into a bar. But to your point, Micah, like, what do you mean by a bar? Do you mean Chili's that has a bar?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like,
Well, and like you say that to someone, which I totally agree with. Like, there's people who shouldn't walk into a casino.
Yeah.
There's people who shouldn't walk into a car dealership.
Yeah.
Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, financial irresponsibility is financial irresponsibility.
100%.
Like, I bet there's more people who are struggling with debt.
Oh, yeah.
Than they are with gambling addictions.
And to that point, the problem isn't the casino or the car dealership. The problem is that you should honor the Lord with what you have.
Right.
And so somebody who's like getting a new car every year and they're jacking up their...
Who can't afford it.
Who can't afford it.
There's people who can afford it.
Absolutely. Yeah, do whatever you want to do. But they're keeping themselves in a position of...
Slavery.
Because you're what does the text say? That the borrower's slave to the lender. And so like, you're in this position and you're there voluntarily. Same thing for the gambler. You're in that position voluntarily.
Well, I think it'd be the wisdom in this is to say, not just I should be responsible financially, but also to say I need to understand that when I go to a casino, that they built the lights, the whole thing's dark, and they built the lights a certain way to draw me in. Like, there is a science behind that. I also need to know when I go to a car dealership, they are trained in a specific way to enforce this perspective that I need to get that car.
Yeah.
If you don't go in with those perspectives, you're probably going to get
off.
led in the wrong. So it's like the wisdom of it. It's just funny to me that, and you know me with my consistency on this stuff, that people in these kind of rules are like, I'm not going to go to a casino, but I don't have a problem that my kid just graduated with $120,000 of student loan debt.
Yeah.
For he's going to be a teacher.
Yeah. Well, and because
you're both idiots.
Because what people do is they go, oh, but that's for a noble cause, And it's like
the slave is still borrower to the lender,
right? Yep. It depends.
Or sorry, the borrower is still slave to the lender.
The slave is the borrower.
It's not different.
It's
right?
not. It's not the slave is the borrower. Of the lender. But
side note, real quick, I wish Dave Ramsey would quit quoting any text except for Proverbs.
Yeah. Because Proverbs is a wisdom text.
Anytime like in our financial peace classes, anytime he quotes a text, I start going, because it's so terrible.
I love it. That's awesome. But it's one of these things that like, so I told a story of a guy that I knew when I was maybe 24 and I was working at a coffee shop in Lubbock, and he was the only other Christian that worked at this coffee shop. We were the only believers there. And over spring break one time, he and some buddies went down to Mexico for a few days. He came back, and the next week, to everyone who would listen, he was laughing and telling this story about how he went into this town square, and for entertainment one night, this lady comes out naked with a donkey and engages in sex with the donkey. And he was like, it was the most funny thing you've ever seen. And I'm like, dude, that is so repulsive. There's nothing God glorifying about that. And the fact that he delighted in it, that for him, he took joy in this thing that's, I don't know, like it's, well, I don't know. You might correct me on this and say this is just me, but I tried to watch years ago, and I think I've mentioned this on here before too, but I tried to watch years ago the TV show Criminal Minds because I like police drama type stuff. And every other episode is like about kids being molested or abused or raped or kidnapped. And after like 4 episodes, I was like, yeah, I can't stomach it. I was so dark. I just felt dark all the time. And yet there are Christians that's pleasurable to them. And I struggle with that. Like, where do we draw the line for what we enjoy?
So you don't actually struggle with that.
Okay. I don't struggle with it. I just hate it outright.
No. You struggle with something else that you're actually calling. What it sounds like is you're saying I struggle with them watching a show and not feeling the same tension. That's not actually what you struggle with. Or what I mean is not the show that I don't think you struggle with. I think you struggle with the reason why they don't feel the same way. Does that make sense?
Okay. Flesh it out.
So like the reason you feel the tension of something like Criminal Minds, which I've even heard from people who aren't believers that are like, man, I can't handle the weight of the show because it's just like I'm just
dark,
depressed all the time, right?
Yeah.
So your question for someone who's a believer is, why does this not bother you?
Why is it not enjoyable?
The reason I'm saying you can't struggle with the show is because Ryan Dalglish's perspective can't be the barometer for the show, right?
You're right.
So that's if you say I struggle with them watching the show, then you have to actually set the universal standard for everybody else as to what that looks like.
I'm just kidding,
right? Which nobody would be happy with that, and then you'd be sad all the time because I'd be telling you you're the idiot who's inconsistent in everything you say. So like, I don't think that you're struggling with the reason, right?
Yeah.
So let's go to something a little easier.
Okay.
Alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
You have an emotional
stigma
with alcohol that I don't have.
Yeah, because my dad was an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me, Micah, you should feel the same way I feel about alcohol.
Yeah.
Feel, right? I'm being very specific.
Yeah.
You cannot say to me, Micah, you have to have the same emotional stigma I have about alcohol.
Right.
We can have a wisdom conversation about alcohol.
Absolutely.
But you can't say I feel the same way. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's the difference between you saying I struggle with that is implying that your emotional tension is an emotional tension someone else has to have.
Yeah.
I think that's difficult because then it's culturally based, experiential based. It has to be something else. That's what I mean by I don't think you actually struggle with how they feel about the show. I think you're talking about why the question for you is like, why is there not a conversation with them about that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's how as a follower of Christ, is this something you take pleasure in? That's the question that I would want to ask.
I have a question on that regard. Like, if to just figure out how we're defining entertainment or like things we're taking in or like what we're doing. So for instance, I watched a show the other day. I watched an episode. There was a new season of Black Mirror that was released, and a lot of the show, what it does is it provokes.
Wait, is this the one you told us about?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into those details again. I'm not going to talk about that. But a lot of what it does is it provokes, like, this is potentially where we could be going as a society based off technology, based off social media, based off certain things. I don't know. So like, I bet there are people who watch it and find typical pleasure in it. It's like, oh, look at the violence, look at the, like, whatever it might be, like what the episode that we talked about a few years ago, like they might be sick and twisted and find pleasure in that. I watched the episode so one of the episodes I hated. Like, I hated what it did. What they were addressing was like our relationships that happen in a VR world actually cheating. And that's the topic they were addressing. Like, well, it's not real world. It's not real physical touch. So it can't be real cheating. But as you're watching it, of course it is. Like, you're getting emotionally attached. And then they're diving in the realms of like, anyway, they're diving into a bunch of stuff that's happening. As I'm watching it, I'm not finding pleasure in it, but I watched it and it provoked me to think more about it. And so like, I don't regret watching it. I don't feel like it was sinful. I don't feel like it was dishonoring to the Lord. I walked away from it and I was like, what a sick and twisted view that people have of relationships. And also, like, this is a terrifying thing to even begin to question, but it's obviously on people's minds already. So it pushed me to a point where I was like, I don't know. I was okay with watching it from the perspective of not pleasure, but from the perspective of provoking thought. Of
I would argue that you do find pleasure in the show because a new season came out and you're watching it. So if a new season's coming out, you're like, I like this show.
I guess I just have I'd have a different, I think of pleasure, and I'm thinking like giddy, like happy pleasure.
No, I mean,
okay, cool. Then that's fine with me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're deriving an enjoyment out of it, which is why you continue to go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that like,
so even though like I disagree with what's happening on screen, that I'm provoked to think about it. So I'm enjoying that.
Yeah. I mean,
that thought or
there's
whatever.
a reason that you're like, hey, a new season came out. I want to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Could you say, I think I'm having a hard time with the pleasure thing.
Okay.
That's what I said.
Because
let's tweak it.
could we say that there's like an interest? So like what I mean is like you could say, or let me use the definition you just defined, right? You enjoy there's some kind of pleasure derived from it. You've watched some crazy sermons when I'm in the hotel room with you.
True.
And you wouldn't say I'm deriving pleasure from those sermons.
No, you're right. I'm
But you
studying.
still do it, Ryan.
I'm studying.
So you can't say that that's the universal standard then.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm struggling with the word pleasure. Like,
Okay,
you see what I'm
fair.
saying?
Yeah.
I think
There's some sort of
it's interest.
benefit derived from it. However you want to define
Sure.
it.
Yeah. There's a reason you're engaging in that thing, which sometimes I think is pleasure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it means it always is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Plinko board, and one of the categories is pleasure, but there's a reason. So there's a motivation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a motivation.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes it's pleasure. Sometimes it's entertainment.
right. And that
Sometimes it's
motivation drives you back to that thing,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So for some people, it's the sexual pleasure. For some people, it's just the enjoyment. For some people, it's the mindlessness of it, the scrolling.
Yeah.
For some people, like us reading books that we wouldn't agree with, it's an educational thing. We're framing our position better. So there is a motivation behind it.
Yeah.
So I am curious about the motivations of people that do not drive them deeper into the heart of Christ.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to say that?
No.
No.
Because now we got to talk about eating.
Okay.
I don't know if we had that conversation with eating. Like, I'm not sure if you're picking a bag of Skittles or some bell peppers cut up with an option of which one drives me towards a motivation to honor Jesus.
I don't think that people do that. I don't necessarily mean that people shouldn't do that.
But you're deriving pleasure from one.
Yeah.
It's entertainment to some degree. See what I'm saying? Like, that's what I mean. Like, that's why I'm saying I don't think we can, because then we have to talk about things that people aren't thinking about in terms of honoring Jesus. But you could.
Let's do that.
But you could.
Yeah. Because
I think here's where I'm getting at.
Okay,
I think there's actually something core that
go.
I feel like you're overstepping.
All right. I have long legs, so
I think your struggle,
Michelle would have run right into it.
Yeah.
your struggle is legitimate.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think I think what you're trying to explain is, it feels to me like it's a Ryan perspective of trying to explain it,
Shape it.
versus like I think you're jumping over the premise. I think what
Jack be
people are
nimble.
not I think people are not trying to make decisions based on what's glorifying to Jesus, and that's the problem.
Agreed.
So, but I think that's the conversation, not the struggle with one. Like, you're going here, like where you're going to step 2.
Yeah, because for me, the part of it is with the Spirit of God inside of us, whose job it is to transform us from glory to glory into the likeness of Christ. It feels inconsistent that we could be motivated continually into things that don't look like Jesus and not feel any inward tension. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like, I've got the
Yes.
Spirit of God inside me.
I think I think we got some definitions again. Like, what do you mean by motivated into? So
yeah.
you're not, when you talk about health, I've never heard you talk about health from specifically a God-centered perspective. You've mentioned before you feel like you do a better job as a shepherd if you're healthy.
Yeah.
But that's not your motivation is like, I want to be healthy.
I want to be effective for as long as I
Yeah, but you're not.
have breath.
Okay. Yeah, fair. But like, I don't actually have a problem with that being motivated. I cannot say that stupid word. Motivated by, it's because I keep saying by.
Yeah.
Motivated by a heart to glorify God in everything you do. I think that's fantastic. All I'm saying is, I'm not sure that now we define what we're motivated into, the things we're motivated into by a different standard. So here's what I mean.
Okay.
Pierce smokes pipes in American Spirits.
Mm-hmm.
What?
You
start the episode over.
You do not.
No.
And there's reasons you don't, and there's reasons he does.
Yeah.
You guys could have a conversation about motivation in that, but it's still going to be opinion based.
Sure.
You're going to have a really hard time telling Pierce, I don't think that you're honoring Jesus by smoking a pipe.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that.
Again, now that could be a wisdom conversation later, right? But that's what I mean. If you say that a heart to honor Jesus speaks into what I'm motivated into doing, I don't know if anybody hears what you actually mean. What they hear is now there's a definition for the things I should and shouldn't go into.
Okay.
That's my struggle, is like, now we have to define that versus, again, going back to the base, the premise is I want to honor God with everything I do in my life. I think if that's the base, the foundation, then I'm able to make wisdom decisions for me on top of that.
And then there are absolutes that we avoid.
Sure.
Like adultery. Like that's an easy
Sure.
one.
Yeah, which was the extreme you were talking about earlier, right? There's some things that are laid out in the scriptures pretty clearly, and almost all of them are sexually based.
Well, one of the stats that go ahead, finish your thought, and then I'll come back to that.
That, in my mind, is not a conversation of wisdom. Now, it may be a conversation of wisdom in terms of how you get into that position you're in, but like you're not going to say like
anybody trying to justify their affair is just a sinner.
Right. This is not.
They're not glorifying God.
Yeah, you're not saying I'm honoring Jesus in this at all. So that's what there's like the category of things.
Right.
What I don't want to do is correlate that specific category of things that the scriptures like this is
absolutely
dishonoring to God with the things that we culturally view as dishonoring to God.
Right.
That I think has been the conversation with guys like Spurgeon and people like that for a long time that I've always had a problem with, because you get into this place where the church leaders decide for people what is and isn't okay.
Yeah.
And I think you're exemplifying how that's an easy move.
Yeah.
Right? I have a problem with this show. Well, just because you have a tension and problem with the show doesn't imply that has to be the case for everybody.
Sure.
You might have some stuff in the past that makes you feel differently about the show.
Sure.
Like what if someone at our church was an FBI investigator that actually did stuff with kids, and they're like, man, this is kind of mindless enjoyment for me because this is not actually true, and it's like I get to be in the world. You see what I'm saying? Like there could be a situation where it is that way that you couldn't have a problem.
Sure.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's, I think, how it's a slippery slope if we jump to step 2 first instead of setting the foundation of, because now it's if the foundation is I'm going to honor Jesus in everything I do, then a lot of those become wisdom conversations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm off in that?
No, just thinking through it. I do think, and I don't know that I'm prepared to have this full conversation in this way, but I think that the spirit within us desires the things of God. And I think things that we're motivated to or drawn to either move us closer to the heart of God or don't.
Why is it that too? Why is it those two extremes? Because you just made a universal statement that, again, I don't think you can make with food.
Yeah.
You can't.
Why can't you?
Because if someone says, well, I have sourdough bread, and another person goes, yeah, I have sourdough bread, but I mill my own wheat.
Yeah.
Which one's better? Which one motivates you more towards the heart of God?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we could speak about each individual food item.
But that's kind of what you're saying. How else do you break down what you eat?
Yeah.
Besides each individual food item?
Yeah. I feel like, all right, so let's back up. The spirit in us desires God rightly. And apart from the spirit, I don't. We talked about this a long time ago, right? Or not super long ago, a few months back. Apart from the spirit, I don't have a chance to desire God rightly. And I think our lives are daily on a trajectory. So help me frame this. The choices that we're making, that we compile throughout the week, that some seem mindless, some seem just rote, right? It's just the thing you do. As you compile those decisions, the trajectory of your life is towards God or not. Is that okay? Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because it seems contrary to the idea of Galatians 5 that you either take the hand of the Spirit or you take the hand of the flesh. So it's
I'm doing it in a bigger picture instead of micro pictures.
I know, but you say it as a trajectory. Like, how is the trajectory of my life not like I desire to walk by the Spirit or I desire to walk by the flesh?
I agree. But then this is where I'm getting stuck, because every moment then is one of those two things. It's walking by the Spirit or walking by the flesh.
Yes.
And you're saying that can't be the case in food.
That's not what, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying it can't be defined by the food I eat.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
What you're trying to do is define whether I'm walking by the Spirit by the food I eat. That's the examples you're giving. You didn't say that.
I didn't say food, but that's
my point with food is that if
it's
the premise you have is that's the premise, then I define whether I'm walking by the Spirit by the food I eat.
Yeah. So the heart behind it, the I don't know what else to call it, but motivation or urge. But there is something that drives us into everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything. So even the people who aren't highly motivated people are driven to be lazy people or whatever. There's something that drives us.
Okay, finish that, because I think we're still talking about two different things.
Okay, no, correct it. Go ahead.
That's still self. That's still flesh. When you say where every one of us is driven or motivated, that's still step 2.
Okay.
If it's not me walking by the Spirit, then my motivations mean nothing.
Right.
So like I'm more driven than you guys are in a lot of things in life in general, right? That's just my personality. Most people, I'm more driven than most people, but that doesn't mean I'm like walking by the Spirit more than you are.
Gotcha.
We're all seeking to walk by the Spirit. But in the midst of that, like that informs me being driven. That's what I feel like where we're missing is like I feel like you're still trying to start at step 2 and I'm trying to start us at step 1.
So do step 1 and then let's roll from there.
Okay. So then if I'm walking by the Spirit and not by the flesh, I'm not seeking to take myself and make my righteousness my worth based on how well I do. That I'm resting, which we preach all the time. You preach all the time, resting in Jesus, walk by the Spirit. That then informs all the decisions I make.
Yes.
So from there, now we can talk about some nuances.
Okay.
Sorry, Andrea. We can talk about some nuances, because then there's wisdom that goes on top of that, right?
Right.
So I would say
absolutes to avoid. That if you're doing these things, you are not walking by the Spirit.
Agreed. Yeah. I think there's also some maturity things.
Yes.
Someone who's
100%
more spiritually mature is going to be more conscious of things that are dishonoring to Jesus. Example being Paul when he talks about food sacrifice to idols. He says a young believer feels like it's wrong,
right?
Because they've known it's wrong for their whole life, and then you as a more mature believer,
it's not wrong.
It's not wrong. So examples being that.
Flip that. There are things at 50 that I wouldn't probably engage in that I engaged in at 20.
But the premise can't be
the thing.
I'm more motivated to honor God.
Yeah.
It's that I'm walking by the Spirit, I'm resting in who I am in Christ. Yeah. Then that's the thing that informs the decision making.
Okay. So for me though, and I just need to say it a different way. So frame this for me. For me, the motivation is walking by the Spirit. So people are motivated either by that or not, which is what you're trying to get to.
No.
Right? No?
What do you mean by motivated? So like, if I'm walking, here's what he says. If I walk by the Spirit, here's what my life looks like.
Right.
It's not if I walk by the Spirit, I'm motivated to live this way.
No. My desire is to walk by the Spirit. Okay? So don't call it motivated then, but...
No, you said if I walk by the Spirit, I'm motivated to do these things.
No. I said I'm motivated to walk by the Spirit. That's my desire. Like that's not that I'm motivated to do these things, but like in everything, I think it's either self-motivation or spirit motivation. Does that make sense?
You just switched it.
Well,
just tell me what you're trying to say, and then I'll sorry.
I don't know. I just think like, well, I mean,
here's what it feels like. It feels like you're trying to get after a thing where it's like, here's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. And I'm trying to come back to a place of saying like here's what you preach all the time, which I love, is that the reason you're still struggling with that sin is because you're trying to avoid that sin.
Yeah.
It feels to me right now like you're trying to tell people to avoid sin.
Yeah. So that's not the goal. 100%. So it has to be then, okay. So let's just state facts. You've already said it several times, Galatians 5:16, if you walk by the Spirit, you won't carry out the desires of the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the job of the Spirit from 1 Corinthians is to transform us from glory to glory into the likeness of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
We know we have everything we need for life and godliness so that we can become partakers of the divine nature and escape the corruption that's in this world through lust. Now, all that being said, so maybe this is what's bugging me. So when there are things in my life that aren't God exalting,
Mm-hmm.
that should be an indication to me in that moment. Like, this is not by the Spirit. Like, I'm not living by the Spirit.
Because you're talking about a specific category of things that whether it's something that the scriptures like, this is not, or something that you feel in the moment, like, which I think we know it. Like when you're engaged in something that's not God honoring, I think the Spirit's like, hey, not okay. I think we know it. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think my struggle is, I think sometimes for you and probably a lot of people, there's a bleed over of that feeling. So you might have some emotional tension because of
the feeling to the thing rather than.
No. I'm saying I think that's problematic because
I know, but you're saying that that's the bleed over. I start to attach that feeling.
Yes,
to the
because
thing.
if you have an emotional experience from the past or some kind of moral lens that someone else doesn't have that's for you, then that creates a feeling within you, similar to how a young believer would feel like eating meat sacrificed to idols is wrong. Paul says, don't cause them to sin by making them violate their conscience. Right. But he's acknowledging that this person in that moment feels like that thing's wrong. If you ask one of those young believers to get up and talk in front of the church, they'd be like, why are y'all eating meat sacrificed to idols? Because that's for them what they feel the weight of. That's what it feels like to me that you're saying in these moments is I have these things that I feel.
Yeah. It's similar to Romans 14 where Paul talks about some eat only vegetables and some eat, everything. And then he says, who cares? Let each one stand before their master, and they will stand before their master.
Right.
And so in that case, it's not an issue of right or wrong. It's an issue of a person's personal convictions. So the aim in Romans 14 is to honor the Lord. They both do it to glorify the Lord.
Yes. I think what you're actually getting at, let's use Criminal Minds, back to Criminal Minds, because I think it's a good example. Is your question for people is like, what benefit is this for you?
Yeah.
Right? So like, because I know the tension you're feeling right now because of the feeling, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have a hard time making a consistent argument against it because of the feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But what you can say is like, man, why are you engaging in that? Like, of what benefit is that?
Do you guys remember, I think it was Ross Perot running for governor forever ago. You wouldn't have remembered. You were too young.
I remember the name.
Yeah. And
Ross Perot.
I don't know. No. It wasn't Ross Perot. It was somebody else.
Big ears.
There was somebody running for governor of Texas. I forget what his name was, but there was a guy running for governor of Texas, and he was leading in the polls until somebody asked him his position on rape. And he said, rape is just like West Texas weather. He goes, just sit back and enjoy it. It'll be over in a few minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And that was everybody's response. And and it tanked him.
Yeah.
Right. Because nobody thinks that's a funny joke.
No.
Nobody thinks that's an approach to it. Right. Like there's a little bit of like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And people who find that humorous, you kind of go, why do you find that funny? And I think that that's some of the tension that I feel, because I know a lot of Christians who, and I don't know if it's maturity, immaturity. I don't know if it's just my own feelings, my own bias.
Well, I think that
do we have to filter through all those things?
Well, no, because you just spoke of something of a sexual nature. And I feel like it's incredibly clear. Like
in the scripture.
The sexual nature is clear. I think that's where for me, like the it's getting messy is like, I don't think
the things below that.
I don't think you can take Criminal Minds and put it in the same category as sexual stuff. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's always been
it's a dark show.
Right. That's always been your struggle, though.
Yeah.
Is correlating those kind of things because of how you feel about them.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel the same way you feel about Criminal Minds.
Yeah.
How we're going to approach it different, probably, you probably are in my camp on this, is you're going to tell someone like, hey, that's not good for you. Like that's not a benefit for you.
I don't see it being beneficial.
I'm going to be like, you're an idiot. Right? So we feel this. Okay, let's not use that show because this might not be a perfect example. I'll use one that I watched during COVID when I was real sick, and I watched the whole season, and in a day and a half, maybe. And I've never felt so gross in my entire life. Hannibal.
Oh yeah.
I forget where I watched it.
I remember you saying that.
Oh, it was like I got sucked in. This was like the story was really good, and I got to the end of the first season, and it was done, and there was no more episodes to watch. And I remember getting up and going, "Oh!" Like I felt like I was like trying to shrug something gross off of me, and it wasn't. I don't remember it being sexual in nature. I don't remember there being anything like blatantly what we would say like fits in the category of like this is obviously dishonoring to Jesus. I don't remember that, but what I do remember is the feeling of like. That's like, why did I just waste a day and a half engaging in that? And that's really, I think, more the question in my mind of stuff that's not in the camp of like blatantly dishonoring to God.
Yeah.
Is why.
Well, it's interesting. So like Passion of the Christ, very bloody, very brutal picture of the cross, and probably on screen one of the closer pictures
that's why it was rated R.
of the cross, right? And I did not, back to the word pleasure, I didn't take pleasure in those scenes, but it's one of only 2 movies that I've ever watched that made me tear up because I thought about, now, this was 20-something years ago.
I wonder if you would now.
I wouldn't now. Because 20 years ago, my perspective was the physical suffering of Jesus rather than what he accomplished in defeating sin and death.
No, that's what I mean. I wonder if...
I know. I wouldn't tear up now.
No. Sorry.
Okay.
I wondered, because... Not to tear up. I wondered if you would feel the same, because you said I didn't take pleasure in those scenes.
Yeah.
I wonder if you would now.
Oh, I see. Take pleasure in the scenes?
Because
I don't know.
Because it's the victory of Jesus.
Yeah, and he's conquering sin and death. And there's a different, because what I was trained to do growing up is think about how much his body must have suffered. And so that's what broke my heart before.
And you don't believe that was a substitute for you now?
No. And now looking at it and going, man, look at how victorious he is. Now,
would we stand up in the theater and clap?
Right. So so here's the thing. That was bloody. And I really debated this resurrection season of showing that movie to my boys. Like, but also I want to like frame it. I don't want them to come away thinking about the physicality of it more than the spirituality of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe not yet, because I really want to shape that a little bit more for them. They're old enough, I think, to watch it.
It's not okay to watch rated R movies, anyways.
It's not.
So, but here's the thing: there are other movies that are where I don't know, like I don't know. There are. Is it the Blumhouse like horror movies or whatever that like Human Centipede type stuff where everything
like way over gory and nasty? Yeah.
And
what's his Eli Roth's one of the main directors of a lot of those.
Yeah. And so like where people are being tortured and like the whole movie is about this. And I go, where is any redemption in this?
I think it's a fair question to ask. I don't really know like universally if we could ever like make a line for that. Like, so what if you remember that movie Glory?
No.
The Civil War movie?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you have dudes who like literally reenact the Civil War stuff and they probably love it. You see what I'm saying? Like,
it's go ahead.
I think the tension you and I are probably always going to feel for the rest of our life is you have a tendency towards wanting to make those kind of like a filter for everybody. And I'm always going to lean back against that because I think that it's hard for me. It's really hard to be consistent with it. Because plus there's cultures. Okay. Here, let me give you an example.
Is there a way that glorifies Jesus?
I don't think that's the right question.
Really?
No.
Because that feels like the right question all the time.
Hear me again from the beginning. The right question has to be from the premise.
Yeah.
Is my goal to glorify Jesus?
Yeah.
That's what you and I are not on the same page apparently on that.
Okay.
Because for you, that is a filter for Ryan's perspective of every decision instead of the basis, the foundation being I want to glorify God with my life. And then from there I build. You're having trouble with the nuances.
Yeah.
And you're actually making a statement saying that's not glorifying to Jesus. And I'm trying to say, I don't think it is either, but I'm not sure I can make that statement consistently.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And you're saying it has to be the premise. And I'm saying it can't be.
Yeah.
You cannot go to step 2 before step 1.
Yeah.
That's my struggle with where you're landing.
So the better question then, forget the movie. The better question is to, in that conversation, if somebody's talking about this kind of, and you're having an open conversation with someone about it, the better question then is to ascertain, So tell me, like, is your aim in life to glorify Jesus in everything you do, and not make it specific?
No, you've used tons of examples that disagree with yourself right now before. Like you've had conversations about gynecologists before that are guys.
Yeah. You
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This has always been your struggle, is that you want to like correlate Ryan's perspective to how everybody else should think.
Yeah.
In that thing.
Yeah.
In that regard. I know the tension you're feeling because I've watched it for years.
Yeah.
I think all I'm trying to say is, let's say it this way, because this will make you feel better. I think more people that are believers would shy away from some of those things if the premise of their life was, I want to glorify Jesus with everything I do, instead of trying to figure out, is this the right thing to do in this moment?
Yeah. Okay. So let's pull that back, and then
I actually think what I'm saying is bigger than what you're saying.
I'm with you. I get it. I think it's, for me, then what pisses me off is people who, let me finish the thought, but people who make space for Jesus. And they're like, yeah, I go to church on Sundays, and then Friday and Saturday night doesn't matter to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what you're getting the heart at. Like, they're not actually interested in glorifying Jesus. So the decisions they're making Friday and Saturday night, we're not condemning the decision. What we're condemning is the fact that they don't have a desire to glorify Jesus.
The reason they make that decision is not because they made a bad decision. It's because their premise is off.
Yeah. So instead of addressing the symptom, we have to address the disease. Right? Does that make sense? So, like, to your point, there would be things that people could do or people could watch, and we can't. And so go back to the Bible, go back to 1 Corinthians, and go back to Romans, and say, some people are going to go, I will never eat anything but vegetables because I want to glorify God. Other people are like, man, give me all the steaks, I'm going to glorify God. So be it, God's glorified, because that's their aim. There are other things like the sexual sin that we would say, there is no way in hell you're glorifying God in this.
No.
And so clearly your motivation is not the glory of God. But it's the issue isn't the sex, the issue is the heart. So we got to go back to that every time. And so the people who are just trying to find space for Jesus in their life, well, I do my quiet time for 5 minutes in the morning, but the rest of the day is mine. That's the wrong heart. And that is what needs to be addressed.
Which I'll give you an example from my life that is, I feel the same tension you do. But I've tried to not speak of it in a way that makes people feel like it's wrong, even though I feel the same tension you feel for the stuff you're talking about. And that shows, movies, plays, any kind of entertainment that has demonic influence in it. Because for me,
that's the real world thing.
For me, I recognize that this isn't fake, right? I'll give you an example of one that
I'm not going to go play with a Ouija board today.
No. I'll give you an example of one I really struggle with. And I ended up, good or bad, I'm not sure, but ended up finishing the season because I was like, I kind of got to know what happens. But the fourth season of Stranger Things, there was some stuff that happened in there that I was like, like it wasn't demonic, but it appeared to be. In my head, I'm just like, it just feels same tension. For me, it feels off. So like when people tell me they're going to see a certain movie that has that, I'm just like, and I feel the same tension you do. But my hope for them is not that they would not see the movie because Micah set a standard for them. But my hope is that they would start making decisions based on the premise of, I want to glorify God in everything I do. And I would rather watch a young believer or someone who's less mature in their faith grow than I would just not make a bad decision. Example. There was someone who counseled a couple a long time ago, believers that were sleeping together, and he said, just get married so you're not sinning. That's a terrible advice, right? That seems like that would be the same thing. Like, don't go watch this movie so that you can, rather than saying, I'm not saying they should watch the movie. I'm just saying like what I'd rather get at is which is what you're ultimately trying to say. Why is it that you're exposing yourself to those things?
Just muddy in my head.
That's the question you're really trying to ask is like, what's the motivation for exposing yourself to these things? Some of it, okay, I'll give you, well, I'm not going to give that example. There are some things that we've experienced, the three of us, I won't say specifically, that you are going to have a harder time with than me and Pierce because we don't have the same experience as you do in that. One being alcohol, which you don't have a problem with now.
Yeah,
but
I don't
like
have a problem with alcohol.
But there's like...
It doesn't deny the fact that the way that alcohol was shaped for me growing up
Yes.
because of my father has an impact on how I think.
Well, we did have a conversation recently about what drunk is, where we differed.
Did we?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, because I think that's the wrong question to ask. What he says is, don't be drunk with wine, instead be filled with the Spirit. Like,
don't be controlled.
Yeah, exactly. So I think to draw a line of what's drunk and what's not drunk is kind of like when college students used to come to us and ask, how far is too far in my relationship? It feels like the same conversation to me.
Sure.
That's where we've differed in this conversation, I feel like, is I'm trying to say, set the premise and then watch how it affects your life. And I feel like you're still trying to say like stop making stupid decisions, which may just be the shepherd in you trying to get people away from it. And I'm trying to like create the life that is built correctly.
Yeah. Well, I've had people tell me stuff like, you know, I don't care what God wants me to do. I'm going to do this thing anyway. And I'll go, man, like that will be an easier and easier decision to make. You will continue to make that decision more and more.
Right.
Because at some point you'll just decide that you're the one that matters and that God doesn't, which gets back to the heart of what you're saying, Micah. It's so you're not actually interested in glorifying Jesus.
Right. I think I actually really appreciate how you handle those things, because I think you're actually probably in the moment more of a benefit for people, because you're questioning the decision making in the moment.
One of the things that I'm trying to do better on is when I'm talking to people about marriage, not using Michelle and myself as a standard, but also being able to talk about the grace that God has exhibited in our marriage. So like, look, this is where we've benefited from the work of God in our lives without setting us as the standard, letting Christ be the standard. And so that's something you've said to me over the years too. And I'm trying to do better at that. I try not to be the standard in these things. There are some things that just dumbfound me. And I just go, I don't understand how there's any joy in that.
So I had a conversation with someone, it's probably been 10 years ago, another elder in another church, who he said he was going to stop watching boxing and UFC because he didn't feel like it was something he should be exposing himself to.
Well, he shouldn't be exposing himself at all.
Don't do that. That's awkward.
Just stands in front of his TV naked.
Hey, check this out.
What are you doing?
Hey, boxers!
So that's an interesting conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, I don't have any problem with it, but I'm also like a pretty aggressive person. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and Paul addresses it even in 1 Corinthians 9, you know, I don't box the air. He's talking about it was the event in Corinth. It was secondary to the Olympics in Rome.
Yeah.
So like anyway.
Yeah, your question a second ago, Ryan, I don't know if it's back to my understanding of what we were talking about pleasure at the beginning, but you said, I don't know how people can find joy in that. Like, is that, I don't know. I've been riddled in thought with a lot of this, because I think there's plenty of things that like people will have some sort of motivation to go towards. So for instance, I read a story recently, and this doesn't make, I don't know. It may challenge my thoughts on it. Of this guy who said he went and saw The Witch, which is a horror movie about demonic possession, and so and it's like the and the devil's like personally involved with this one. So it's like 1800s. I don't know if it's Salem, it's something like that feel, that vibe. And he talked about how he in this portion of his book, he doesn't recommend it for people. He's not trying to make a showcase for the validity of this. He said, but I left the theater with a deeper knowledge of spiritual warfare that I hadn't thought about, and I reveled in the victory of my God. And he was like, he's like, most people will go there for fear. They will go there to be, and then leave confused and all these things. And it was challenging in the thought of like, I would never say, go see this movie. And he's like, I'm not even saying that. He's like, but I left there and I pressed into the victory of my God over an enemy that would do that to people.
BS.
And so, okay. So question for that then.
Like, why
Science?
did you need to go see the movie to be able to say that?
I don't know if he's saying he needed to, but he walked away with that response. Why?
Right. Okay. Yeah. But like, still got to talk about why you went.
Oh yeah, which I would. That's kind of my question too. Is like, why would you go to begin with? Like, if you're over here saying like, I don't recommend this, like, what was the motivator to begin with?
Right. Yeah. Sounds like you're saying this is where I ended up. That either could actually be true or a justification for you to go see it in the first place. My question is not how you felt at the end, but like, why did you need to go see that? I actually, tell me y'all's thoughts on this. I know we're almost done with time, but like, I actually feel like the sexual sin because of how it's painted in the Old Testament as the nation of Israel, God's people worshiping other gods, is in the same category to me as
demonic stuff.
Demonic influence.
Well, because false gods. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I feel like they're the same. So that's why I say BS on that.
I got you. Yeah.
Because it feels like it's the same
question on that regard then. So like, I watched that episode of Black Mirror. There was sexual implications and those things, and
it was disgusting. I think we all agreed, right?
No, sorry, not that specific one. The one I talked about earlier, the VR one.
Gotcha.
The VR one. Yeah, that one. That was. I'm sad that I watched.
Are we talking about demonic?
No, but it's sexual in nature.
No,
you said
different standard, right? So like,
well, you were saying that the way sex is taught.
No.
Okay,
that's not what I said.
I'm sorry.
I said that the way that demonic, like worship of other gods, is spoken of is in a sexual nature.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You're thinking about it
I misunderstood you. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm
not saying it's great to expose yourself to sexual stuff in general.
No. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not my point. My point specifically in that was that to watch a movie that you go in knowing is demonic.
Yeah.
Feels to me like it's in the same category as like an affair or like engaging in sexual sin because of how the Old Testament speaks of it.
Yeah, and exposing yourself to that totally.
I wonder, plugged in magazine online, like the movie reviews. I wonder who these people are that write these reviews for these rated R movies, and they're like, okay, so you saw this girl's titties for 5 minutes, and then you saw this, and they had sex, and I'm like, so you're going like. I don't.
Is that what they write? They write titties?
No, but I'm just being crass about it. But it's like I don't.
Like an eighth grader watching this.
I don't think I could handle that job.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I've actually never thought about that before.
Where they're having to say why it's rated R, all the details.
Yeah.
Of it.
Can I give you an example? You immediately jumped to defensiveness about something you did. Right? Well, don't answer. Don't answer.
Okay.
You can't defend that. Like, I mean, you can't say it wasn't.
I don't want to talk more about that, but you continue. Yeah.
My struggle is that all the conversations revolve around the feeling you just had when I said that. My problem with this whole conversation that people tend to have is that there's an automatic defensiveness about something you've done. Yeah. Because what that is to me seems like you're still at step 2.
Yeah, I will.
And not step 1. Because if you're at step 1, then your first question should be like, interesting. What did I miss in that? Like
that, honestly, that's what I meant by what I was asking. I didn't mean for it to come across
but
defensive.
It was. It doesn't matter what you meant. That's what it was.
So like, I guess, how can I phrase that? So my question is legitimately, I did this, felt completely okay. Like I didn't feel like there was anything dishonoring to God. I walked away with it from the whole VR episode, the one they cheating or whatever. I walked away from it and I went to Hannah and was just brokenhearted for the way that people view relationships. And there was aspects of me that thought about it. So my legitimate question was, what did I miss? And so I was,
but it was defensive.
How so? Like,
because you immediately, how you responded was like, but I did this.
I'm sorry. I was literally thinking about that question the whole episode, and I was just ready to get it out.
Listen, this is important.
Okay.
Regardless of how you felt, your response was, but I did this. That is by definition defensive.
Yeah. And
forget about you for a second. Right? Okay. My point is, I'm using that as an example because what you just did is how most of the conversations go. That's my issue.
Yeah.
Is that the first question isn't like
was my aim to glorify God?
No. Isn't void of the defensiveness of something I've done. My first response isn't void of that defensiveness, which means the majority of it, you did it earlier too, the majority of our conversations revolve around things that we feel or things that we've done. That's my issue. I think that's still step 2. Those are wisdom conversations. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean,
I know you didn't in your mind, or you're saying in your mind you weren't defensive, but how you said it was, but I did this.
I know 100%. And I think that there was a couple of things going through my mind, and I'm not trying, and again, now what sucks so bad about these conversations about defensiveness is you can't respond without coming across as defensive. Like,
'cause you are.
And so I'll just explain where I was coming from, and I guess it's just going to be me again defending the point. But that was a point that I was looking forward to bringing up, and so that's why I kind of blurted it out there. But there was also within my mind of like, okay, well, I know where I am to use the continue the step 1 and step 2 language. The reason why I had the question was I know where I am with step 1. What am I missing here? Because the language we're using now seems to imply that this is wrong.
I wasn't talking about that.
I know exactly. And so,
which is my point.
Yeah. And I misinterpreted.
My entire point was that you jumped to that when I wasn't even talking about it.
I know. I misinterpreted. I just heard, yeah.
I know, but you're still thinking about you. I'm using it as a point to explain why I'm like these conversations don't usually go well for most people is because our instinct is to jump to exactly what you just did. I wasn't even talking about you watching that show. You just misunderstood what I was saying.
Oh, I know
right?
you were. Yeah.
You're still defensive of it. Forget.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm not talking about you.
I'm sorry.
I'm using it as an example, right? But this is why these conversations are a struggle for people, is because they're so caught up in what they have done or how they feel about what other people do that they're not able to like get past the haze and the cloud of that to go.
I liked your move. The haze.
To go back to what's the foundation, right? I promise I can probably go on and on and on and people giving me examples, and if they're not 100% consistent, I'm going to poke a hole in it, which is going to piss people off, or it's going to make you defensive, or it's going to make you go, wait a minute, because you feel like I've just wrecked your life, when really all I'm trying to do is say we got to have some consistency if we're going to make a rule. If there's going to be like a standard, there has to be some consistency to it. And I think that's not, all I'm saying is I don't think that's the way to approach this conversation. I think the way to approach it is first to say, which you said earlier, I think really well, is your desire to glorify God with your life or not? Because if that's the case, and this is what you meant, I've understood it now, your motivation to walk by the Spirit is your desire to glorify God. Then when I take the hand of the Spirit, here's what my life looks like. Then the other stuff is conversations of wisdom we can have, and I think minus a few categories where we can say the Bible is very implicit that this is not honoring to God.
No way. No way. I think what's really interesting and makes this entire conversation moot is if we submit ourselves to the Spirit, step 2 isn't even relevant. It'll never come up, because if you're submitting yourself to the Spirit, you won't be doing anything that doesn't glorify God. Everything you do will glorify God.
Okay, but I think that might look different for different people.
Agreed, but everybody will be glorifying God. If you're submitting to the Spirit, that's what you would be doing. You'd be glorifying God.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think y'all, like most people listening, you're still going to have a problem with that because they're still going to want to gauge that. So like if they see, I don't know, if they saw me like having a margarita or Dos Equis or something at dinner, and they had their perspective was like, that's, if they were the meat
that gets back to Romans 14. Right? Yeah,
exactly. So I think you're right in the premise. I think people are still going to struggle because they don't know how to interact with the conversation, which was my entire point with that thing is 100%. People's perspective is based on what they do and what they're comfortable with.
Instead of, it's exactly right.
So really quick, I know we've probably over time, but, and this goes into the sexual category, so it's easy to handle. I saw this stat. This is from 2023. There are an estimated 101 million men in the U.S. 18 years old and older. 101 million men in the U.S. 18 years old and older. 82 million of them, so 82% of men 18 years old and older are subscribed to OnlyFans, which definitely overlaps with church people. There have to be some church people in that 82%.
What you mean with overlaps is, 100%. Yeah. Okay.
100% of church people?
100%.
Like,
can I explain before you respond?
Go.
I don't care. Because I don't think all church people are believers.
Oh, agreed. Yeah. But they're like, this is sad. This is a sad stat. Like there would be.
Is it more sad though because it's a stat like this than it has been for centuries before?
No, but it's like one of these things that you're like, there are people.
I'm not saying it's okay. It's just like, I don't feel any different about it than I have before.
Yeah, I mean, probably the people in our churches who are justifying their OnlyFans subscription are not actually believers.
Well, there's no justification.
Yeah.
It's just like, let's just say someone's
it's not glorifying
let's
God.
say someone's a believer that's doing that. They know. There's no justification.
Yeah.
There's no conversation. You know it's not glorifying to God.
Yeah.
So that's what, I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, when had someone in a ministry I was on the road come up to me and they're like, dude, I cannot stop looking at porn. I literally had 45 seconds to talk to them before they left. They're like, what do I do? And I was like, do me a favor. Next time you go to that website or go to what app, whatever, just pray in that moment. Just say, God, help me glorify you in this today. And see how it responds. Like, see how it changes your heart. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, you think I'm going to tell you to stop doing it. What I'm saying is change your perspective. Because if you open the website and say, God, help me glorify you in this as I'm watching this
it's about to feel real awkward.
Right. I think that it's been the same way, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Which is that's a crazy broadening it a little bit because you meant like directly the porn site or the porn app, but like there's a lot of people that utilize like Instagram and Twitter and these things. And so what is interesting is that like even that perspective of the way that so many people in college, they were like, you got to delete Facebook because so-and-so posts this, and you can never glorify God in these types of scenarios because there's these types of images on there. There's all sorts of dark things on Twitter. There's all sorts of terrible things on Instagram. Can you use Twitter and Instagram as a means to glorify God? Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. So like as you're approaching these things that have the darkest of dark, but also have the lightest of lights, go into it from a perspective of, I'm going to go into this with a perspective to glorify God.
And we would all tell someone, like, let's say, Twitter's a little more like the Wild West. X is. So it's like, if this is a struggle, like, dude, quit getting on X. Just don't get on it. Right. Mm-hmm. Back to an earlier example in this episode, I would tell someone who's like struggling financially, like, stop going to a car dealership.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I know it feels less weighty, but I would say the same thing. This is where the wisdom of moving from the foundation of glorifying God with my life comes in. Like, if it's a problem for you, stop. Yeah. That's why Dave Ramsey says cut up your credit cards, is because most people struggle with overspending, right? Yeah. So don't. Exactly. That's the wisdom, is don't do it. Mm-hmm. Let's not have a conversation. Like, I think a lot of people will try to justify it. Well, I think there's a lot of good I can do on X. Well, yeah, but you're spending the majority of your time looking at titties. So
it feels like such an old man word.
It's just funny that Ryan said it. So we would be like, stop, right?
Yeah.
And again, I don't think that could be a universal principle, because then we would tell missionaries never go to like an area of the world where the women don't wear tops, right? Exactly. So again, that's why I don't personally, I think it's probably weightier than that. I don't personally like the idea of setting those kind of standards because it can't be consistent 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. It has to be wisdom as you walk by the Spirit, motivated by a desire to glorify God, which I like that I agree with you now that I understand what you were saying.
Yeah.
Is that what you say? Would you say is your simpler view?
Yeah.
Approaching it by wisdom, motivated by the Spirit.
Have a heart to glorify God in everything you do, which in turn will hopefully lead you to a place where you say, I'm going to take the hand of the Spirit and let him guide me, which then will produce a life that has the fruit of the Spirit.
Exactly.
And not the fruit of the flesh.
Awesome.
And then I think there's wisdom conversations. Oh, I will say this for maybe like a practical application, which we three have this between us three. Have conversations with a close group of people that also love Jesus. Maybe if you're like, I don't know about, should I do this? Is this a good idea? Yeah. Have a conversation, because then you can work through it. Because you obviously, us three probably have some different viewpoints of like what's okay and not okay. It's been shown in this episode, but like as we talk about that, then we're able to like filter through that and go, this is probably not something, or it's fine. And maybe push each other one way or the other. You know what I mean?
Just challenge each other in the midst of that.
I'll give you an example of one you mentioned yesterday. It's so funny. I leaned to Pierce and I was like, oh man, Ryan thinks I'm an idiot with this stuff.
Oh, I saw you. I didn't mention it in the second one.
But yeah, like your heart for yelling at the refs was what you're yelling at the refs. But what you said was yelling at the refs. Yeah. I always yell at the refs.
Yeah.
Like, bro, that was holding. Are you kidding me? You didn't see that? It's been holding every single play. But I don't think you would walk up to me and be like, dude, you're dishonoring Jesus.
Yeah.
What you mean is if I'm like, just screaming at him like you're the worst thing in the world and cussing at him. And
I should be more specific. I am thinking of people that I've sat in the stands with who berate their kids, who berate the coaches, who berate the refs.
Right.
They're berating their own children.
Right. But exemplified, you were gonna have, if you sat next to me at a Central football game when my kids were playing, or when Grayson plays eventually, you're probably gonna be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah,
because that's not Ryan Dalgliesh.
I hear that Cammie's even worse, though. Right?
Oh, Cammie's way worse than me. She even makes calls for the refs a lot of times in the games. But
make me laugh.
But you would be a little bit uncomfortable because that's not you.
It's not my character, yeah.
Right. But so again, that's us pushing each other, right? You might be able to go after the game, bro, it seemed like you went a little too far on that one thing. I might be like, you're probably right. I might also be able to shake some of that perspective of you, that whatever makes you think that yelling anything at a ref is dishonoring to Jesus, because that's kind of your perspective.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think about like yelling at the waitress for getting my tea wrong. When's the last time a waitress was watching two people tackle each other in the restaurant? Yeah. You know what I mean?
You can't take a physical, intense game. It's all, you know what the difference is? I played soccer.
Yeah.
You swam. No one's yelling at each other in the pool. Like, bro, chill out. Stop hitting me, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference in contact sport.
No, you're right. You're right.
And you're not ever going to feel that same intensity that someone who's played a contact sport feels.
Maybe give me another year.
No. because I think it's ingrained. Like you as a 50-year-old doing that is way different than growing up through your teenage years.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
That would be like saying if my dad became an alcoholic now, I'd feel the same way that you feel about your dad being an alcoholic growing up.
Man, if your dad became an alcoholic now,
that'd be really
That
weird.
would be really weird. Not a lot of people yelled at me while I was in plays. Like, act better.
Come on, man.
The director did what to this show?
Maybe that should be a thing we do from now on.
Oh,
That'd be
that'd
so
be
funny.
hilarious.
Those poor kids on stage.
Well, I heard that at one of the one-act plays recently that one of the poor kid couldn't get the lighting right, and so the spotlight wasn't on the person and all this kind of stuff. So you're like, "Hey, light guy, get your act
together.
You throw a flag.
Oh, awesome. Sweet. That was a fun episode. I like it. Being able to work through it, have a conversation. Well, that's the heart of Simpler.
I'm not sure many people are going to be like, that's a fun episode.
That's true. But I think that's the heart of Simpler, right? Like you said earlier in the episode, like, I just feel like I'm making this so messy. But like that's the point of what we do here, like having the conversation.
Yeah, and I think most people feel that messiness, which I think it's great.
Absolutely.
It might not be fun, but I think it's really beneficial.
It's pleasurable. Dude, I think I told Ryan about it. The Chick-fil-A food truck they have for the mall, I think they go and park it at schools for different events and stuff. I think it used to say "my pleasure" on the thing, but now just in huge stickers, it just says "pleasure" across the side. So I don't know if someone peeled off "my pleasure," but it says Chick-fil-A pleasure.
Yeah, that feels very inappropriate.
They should have fixed that the second they realized that something was.
That feels very inappropriate.
So yeah, thank you for listening and watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode. You can get a hold of us through
Chick-fil-A.
Or Chick-fil-A. You can let us know what you thought by getting a hold of us through our social media on Facebook and Instagram at simplerpod. That's the easiest way to shoot messages through there. Reach out to us. Also, tagged in the show notes down below is our personal social media pages. So if you want to follow along with our personal lives, you want to follow along with Ryan's art or with Micah's ministry through Eagle's Wings and see what's going on there and see him traveling and being a part of chapels around the nation, then that would be awesome. Go check those things out. There's also links to Simpler Bible, to Eagle's Wings Disc Golf Ministry, the 456 Church, all these different things that we mentioned down below. Be sure to tell Steven how much you love him. And hey, wherever you are, head over to YouTube and go and hit that subscribe button, because we're wanting to grow our subscriber count to 1,000 so we can start seeing income flow into our flow through that means, and allowing the channel, the podcast, to be more financially self-sufficient. So you can be a huge help just by going over there, tapping one button. You don't even have to click the bell. You don't even need the notifications if you don't want them. If you know we got new episodes every Tuesday, or do whatever you want to do. We're not going to bother you. We would just love for you to help us out in that way. Thank you so much for being a part of the Simpler community. And as always, keep Christ as core. What could be simpler than that? Catch y'all next week. Bye.